So, Alex, coming into this year, you obviously are focused on a longer format of racing. And I really want to know how you've changed your training, basically from the XCO cross country format, sort of that 60 to 90-minute super intense effort, to the longer endurance events like XC Marathon and the gravel events that you'll be doing, all the way up to Unbound, which is 200 miles. So, what did that look like for you during this off season?
Yeah, I think to address the longer hours, we've just been doing longer hours. So we've been gearing towards volume and doing more big blocks and just consistently having the volume in there. Like, it's kind of blown my mind. The last 2 weeks have been like a deload couple of weeks, just taking advantage of the 2 month break between Sea Otter and Unbound. So kind of absorb all that training from the off season, hit one big race, and then kind of come down a little bit, because we know as soon as we hit Unbound, there's one Lifetime Series race every month through October. But I mean, my deload weeks have been, I think it was 13 hours and 15 hours. So it was like last year, that would have been not a deload week. That would have been one of my biggest weeks. So it's just, I don't know, kind of mind blowing to just look back at what I did and now what I do now.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm kind of surprised to hear that 13 hours would have been one of your bigger weeks when you're training for XCO, because even for those events, I feel like the ride time would put you maybe at 13 on average, in some weeks a lot bigger than that. Did you really never go over like 13 hours?
13 was definitely average. We went over a little bit, but like, to put it in perspective, like 20 hours was a big week like last year when I was racing. And then now I think my average so far this year is like 19 per week. So
whoa,
we also did some like way bigger weeks. Like we did a like block while Jen and I were in Hawaii, and it was 32 hours in a week. So it's just like a lot more this year. And then I guess to further put it in perspective, like my mileage and hours so far this year, I think 2 or 2.5 months ahead of where I was last year in terms of mileages and hours. So
wow.
It's been a lot more this year. And honestly, it's felt good. I think I kind of joke that I've always tried to stick a round peg in a square hole with the XC racing. My natural ability is very much aerobic, long power, like all day kind of power. And XCO racing is very much just like VO2 anaerobic efforts over and over and over again. So I think my body is kind of just thankful that we're doing what it knows it's good at. So I'm excited to see what we're capable of. And I've almost had to relearn how to race in a way. Like, I was racing at Sea Otter and Grasshopper, and I can do these efforts. Like at Sea Otter, I had to bridge up to Keegan and Russell after they made their move. And it was a good, like, 5-10 minute effort somewhere in there. And it was something that in years past would probably have like caused me to bonk, or I wouldn't like recover from that effort. And just the speed at which I can recover from those efforts these days, I think is the biggest thing that volume has changed for me.
That is interesting. So it took you, you'll say 5 to 10 minutes to bridge up to him. So were you essentially solo for that amount of time as you crossed up? And
Yeah.
we know that you made it, which is insane in hindsight, because thinking about that long of a bridge, I mean, that just stresses me out thinking about it. So the fact that you were able to handle it, and then also notice the benefits of your training, that's really interesting. So do you feel like it's not necessarily the high end part of your on bike fitness that's improved, but it's your ability to recover after those efforts is the biggest difference from this volume?
And the ability to do it over and over again. Like for, I guess, the data junkies out there, that bridge, I think for 8 minutes of it was close to 420 watts. And then we sat on, recovered, and then getting dropped up the last like 12-minute climb, I averaged 400 watts. So it's
getting
like
dropped up
just being able to do. so just being able to do those efforts, like they're not VO2 efforts. They're like somewhere between threshold and VO2, but kind of being able to do them again and again is where the fitness has kind of changed for me.
How much time was there between that bridge and then the final hill that you got dropped on that you just mentioned? So how much time did you have to recover? I'm kind of curious.
I think it was 20, 25 minutes. maybe 30 minutes. I wouldn't say it was necessarily recovery though. We were pretty pinned trying to just keep the gap on the people behind. So we came into the end of lap one, a group of 7 with a few people hanging off like 20 seconds behind. And then we made our group of 3. And then by the time we hit the finish line the second time, we had 4 minutes on fourth.
That's
So
insane.
I'd say
Honestly,
it was pretty pinned for the rest of that lap.
recovery was a poor choice of words on my part in regards to the bridge and then that final attack. But yeah, it seems like your results are obviously speaking for themselves. And it's cool to see that you feel like you tapped into your own potential by trusting the process of the extra volume, because I'm sure getting out of your comfort zone was really difficult initially. And I know from following your Instagram that you talked openly about how weird it felt to be spending so much time on the bike. So I am curious, with that transition on the bike, what were the changes you made in the gym? Because I know you're training multiple days per week. You're very focused on your strength work. Did you make any changes?
Nothing big in the gym. I think we kind of hit it harder in the off season, just with the experience we had at Marathon Worlds last year. And kind of, I think what we figured out, and I feel like I've known this for a while, but there's a strong correlation between me being strong, like my back not giving out on me on the bike, and me being in the gym. So two changes is we hit it really hard in the off season. So we're doing 3 days a week, normally Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but also with like some pretty big circuits and a focus. Like the 3, I guess, exercises we were focused on was pull-ups, deadlifts, and front squat. And the goal was to be able to do 15 pull-ups straight. Deadlifts was, I think it was a set of 3 at 2 times body weight. Oh, sorry, it wasn't front squats. It was bench press, and bench press was a set of 5 at 1.5 times body weight.
Gotcha. And so what is your body weight for people knowing? Because you throw out numbers like 420 watts. That's between threshold of VO2. What is your body weight?
I've actually stopped weighing myself, so it's going to be a guess. But normally when I weighed myself, I was right around 150, so like 68 kilos or so.
That's so gnarly. Respect. And the fact that you're putting the emphasis on strength work is super, it's great to hear. I'd be curious almost to see if your weight has changed much because you are doing the added volume, but then you added some strength. Would it cancel itself out? I'm not really sure, but I think what you pointed out is the focus on durability. You have these specific strength numbers, but the goal is to make sure that your back can handle a bigger day on the bike. Because I remember the Marathon Worlds, I don't know if you finished or you pulled out, but was it your back that basically kind of shut the race down for
you? I
you?
had a DNF, which was a big bummer because I went from 130th to the front group. So I got to hang out with Nino and the boys for a little bit, and then my back was just like, how about no? So it was definitely a big bummer, but I think learning that lesson on that level was good, because it's like if it happened at a local race, I'd just be like, whatever, not a big deal. But to DNF at Worlds really made me think like, okay, we can't let this happen again. And in the past, it's always happened kind of at the end of the season. So I think that's kind of when I get lazy on gym, or I'm traveling and finding a gym is harder. So I think this year we've just focused on like, no matter what, we're going to get something in. And yeah, on the weight, I think I probably put on some weight in the off season, but I think still when we go to like maintenance, like we'll go to 2 times a week or 1 time a week in the gym, I'll probably lose most of like the bulk, I guess, from being super focused in the gym. But again, I'm focused on power, not really weight. So it's like, if I can put out good power and I can put it out over and over again, then it's like, whatever.
Yeah. I've been thinking about power and weight a lot lately because I saw this, it's funny, GCN video that they did, and they were climbing and did one climb basically based off the rider's normal weight and normal, like it was like 1 bottle full. Everything was the same for the next climb, except they added 1 kilo. And their whole equation, and I don't know if you saw this, but they said basically the 1 kilo equated to about 5 watts for this extended climb. And I think it was close to an hour. And the whole idea was that really a little bit of extra power, and we know 5 watts can be significant when you're at the high end of your sport. But for most people, a 5 watt gain can be easier than a kilo loss. And if you're able to do both, which is very possible for a lot of people, you can really see the advantage. But also, it's like, okay, if you think about putting on weight that is helpful in regards to your power, your durability, your ability to recover, and just keep your body balanced, stay out of pain. If the 1 kilo of weight is allowing you to put out way many more watts, and I mean, it just seems like like it's an easy argument to make that it's so much more beneficial
Yeah.
to add a very minor amount of weight when it's going to functionally help you so much. So I wonder if you're experiencing that
Yeah.
quite a bit.
And you got to think about it. I feel like we always love to just talk about power and weight. Like we race up 1 hour long climbs and that's our race. One thing that I don't think a lot of people think about, and it's kind of nerdy, but if you think about like CDA, like how aero you are at like say you were 70 kilos trying to be super light and then you were 72 kilos, like you're not going to see that on your body. Like you're not going to be like wider. You're not going to be taller. So it's like, if you can put more power out at 72 kilos, you're still going to have to do the same power to go just as fast on the flats because aerodynamic drag's your biggest like detractor. So you're still going to say do 250 on the flat, but at that higher threshold of 72 kilos, that's a lower effort for you. So it's like coming into the climb, say you have to do 250 watts for 2 hours at 70 kilos with your threshold lower, that's going to be more taxing than 72 with your threshold higher.
Yeah.
And then you get to the climb and you're fresher. Not only could you do more power than 70 kilos to start with, but you get to the bottom of that climb and that 250 watt effort was less.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like we love to look at it in this vacuum of like going up an hour-long climb, Tour de France, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not really racing though, especially off-road.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the more power you have to overcome like rolling resistance and air resistance, the better.
Yeah, well, it is good to hear from you because I think there's obvious low-hanging fruit when someone has a significant amount of weight to lose, but it gets to a point where people are really talking about the difference of 1 to 2 kilos or just a couple pounds.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah, I'm not talking about health weight
yeah,
here. Definitely not. Like if you have weight to lose and that's your journey, like that's completely different. I'm talking about the person who's trying to be 1 kilo lighter and maybe like dangerously be 1 kilo lighter, you know, like, oh, I'm going to skimp on this meal or I'm not going to fuel my ride. Like that kind of stuff is where I don't feel like losing the weight makes sense. But yeah, I mean, if you're overweight and you want to get to a healthy weight, then that's a completely different conversation. This is more, I guess, performance weight.
Thanks for clarifying too, because it's a huge argument I get in regards to resistance for starting strength training is that fear of putting on such an insignificant amount of weight, even though all those benefits are still there. So I am curious,
Yeah.
you made these changes in your training on the bike, off the bike. What is the training intensity versus race intensity? Do you feel like you can really get yourself to a place in training where you match the intensity that you get from a race? I'm just kind of curious because, you know, between me, like I
It's a
haven't really done any of this racing yet. And I'm curious about it.
yeah. I mean, it's different, right? I'd like at Sea Otter, it was a super hard day. I think we normalized like 350 or 360 for 3 hours. So like by no means easy, but I didn't set any power PRs either, right? Like that bridge wasn't the best 8 minutes I've ever done. And the last climb wasn't the best 20 minutes I've ever done. But racing's different because it's not like do 5 minutes, rest for 5 minutes, do five, you know, it's like do that 8 minute bridge. And then maybe Keegan saw me get on and he wants to attack. And then you have to do a sprint at the end of that 8 minutes. So it's not really like a structured workout, so to speak. So there is no success, I guess, in terms of numbers. It's just what the numbers you have to do to stay in the front. So I think in terms of TSS and like peak power, I've definitely done harder days than like a Sea Otter, but it's hard to replicate the way those efforts come in training. And you don't really want to because like a race day, you're going flat out and you're pinned. I mean, it's similar to strength training, right? Like doing motion to failure is something you don't do super often. So it's like the same thing with racing. Like we don't train to failure very often, and normally it's in racing. So we can definitely replicate the intensity and the overall stress in training, but it's like a different exercise, I guess, in racing because it's like it's not a set amount of time, and someone else could like like they say, yeah, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So I feel racing is just kind of its own animal, and you train to be ready for it, and then from there it's just you just go race. You're not like, oh, I'm going to go do 5 minutes at this wattage and then I'll be here, and then to get here I'll do that wattage. It's like, no, it's just whatever it is to get to lead group, and if you feel good to attack and split the group, then you do that.
Yeah, so essentially you can put out bigger numbers on paper in training because the variables are so controlled around it, around those efforts. Whereas training, it's like the race intensity is higher for the whole race, but it's sporadic, it's random, you can't control it. And in that way, it brings its own level of difficulty. That is a really interesting comparison. And it also shows why doing both is so beneficial. I think that's great. And so what I'm curious about now is, how do you balance this intensity of racing on the bike training? Obviously, you're doing at 19 plus, or no, excuse me. 19 used to be your old high volume. What is your normal average volume right now per week on the bike?
That's 19. No, that's a new one.
It's 19.
The old was
okay,
like
so
13, 12 or 13.
Okay, so 19 hours a week on the bike. You're married. Seems like you're in a healthy relationship. You guys seem pretty happy to me. And you have a full-time job working at Specialized. Obviously, this is a very full plate. How has this added volume been, dumping it on top of those two things? Do you have any pieces of advice for anyone that's also trying to take on such a big load?
Yeah, I think time management is probably the first thing that comes to mind, is just like plan it out, right? Like, so I guess on my most hectic of days, like say if I have gym and a 4-hour ride during the week, which is about as big as it gets for me, I'll be up at like 6, get a quick breakfast in. My go-to is toast with peanut butter on top. It's easy to make. It's good. So I just have that before the gym. And then normally I'll check emails while I'm eating that, just make sure I'm up to date, check Slack, and then do gym for an hour, and then be online for meetings in the morning. And then I'm fortunate that my job is very individual contributor heavy. So pretty much as long as I get the allocations out, or I finish the sheet, or I do whatever I need to do, it doesn't matter if it goes out at 3 p.m. or 9 p.m. as long as it's ready for the deadline that it's been given. So like would normally go riding like one-ish, do 1 to 5, and then I would come back at 5, and then I'd finish that work. And then, so that kind of just, for me, I'm fortunate enough that I can split my like work day. Like I'll wake up early, do gym, be online when like Europe's online. So we get into those meetings, and then go for my ride, and then come back and finish like the day-to-day tasks, like the stuff I don't need other people or meetings for. So that's kind of how I handle the most hectic day. On the relationship side, I'm super fortunate that I'm actually the second best athlete in my relationship. So my wife is prepping for a 100-mile run. So the running joke is that I go for a 4-hour ride, and she says that's cute, and uploads a 5-hour run. So I think the support's there because she just understands it from being an athlete herself, and understands the goals and the dreams and supports them 100%. I mean, honestly, couldn't do it without her. Yeah. She even goes to lengths of weighing food when she makes dinner because she knows I track everything, and, just overall super supportive about it, and lives the lifestyle herself.
It's cool you bring that up because I've wondered, my wife doesn't do any endurance feats like that. She's very active and healthy, and the best mom ever. Lish, if you're listening, you are the best. But we both know you don't do long endurance efforts. And so I wondered, I'm like, okay, in you doing it, is it more difficult because now there's this demand on the schedule from your end as well? Does it put more stress on the overall flow of the household? Or is it like you understand and there's less resistance when I'm constantly trying to inch an extra half hour out of every training session, or an extra hour, or I say I'm going to be home at this time and I'm late. So it's cool to hear from your perspective in that she gets what you're going through. And for that reason, you can support each other. But man, I think that's super cool. And overall, even though you have an advantage of maybe some flexibility of moving workouts, at the end of the day, you're still deciding to do it. And you're still, you've figured out what works well for your lifestyle, because even people who have a fixed schedule, they also don't have to make the decisions of deciding when they're going to do something and why. And, there's all this, the decision making can be tough. I deal with this as well. And so I think that finding what works for you well and executing it is without a doubt the most important thing, whether or not you have a fixed
Absolutely.
schedule or a flexible schedule.
And I think just like prioritizing it helps everywhere, right? Like if you're not excited about it, how can you expect other people to be? Like at work, I've always made it a priority. Like we're a company of riders. So I ride and I'll always ride. And that's
Mm-hmm.
important to me. And people know that. Like I'm not quiet about it. I'm not like, got to make this work. It's like I ride and that's what I do. And that's part of the reason I work here. So I think just being clear with your intentions and making it important to you makes it important to somebody else. And then like on the relationship piece, it's like, there's definitely, I think, give and take. Like it's not always about me. Like on Saturdays, Jen does her big runs. So Saturday mornings, it's like I take care of the boys. Sorry, my dog's not actual humans, but so like we switch off with that kind of stuff. And like, Saturday mornings, I'll try to like clean the house and everything so that when she comes home, she can just relax and watch TV. And then she'll be out at Unbound. So she'll support my 10, 11-hour day. She'll be in the feed zones all day. And then at the end of the year, in November, she has her 100-mile race and I'll be out there for God knows 20, 30 hours, whatever it takes for her to finish that 100-mile run. And I'll be at all the aid stations. So I think just it's reciprocal, right? Like she
Mm-hmm.
supports me and I support her and we just want to see each other succeed. And I think that's the basis for the healthy relationship with training is that she has her passions. And even if it wasn't running, right, it would be, I support you in your passions and you support me in mine. Like, I think that's just where we start from. And it's like, how
Yeah.
can we do that together?
I love it, man. Awesome insight, not only on the lifestyle that supports the results you've had, but thanks for just opening up the or unveiling the curtain on your training this off season. It's great to see it lead to your early success in the season, and I'm sure you're just still building. I mean, shoot, you just took the win at another local race this weekend, so keep crushing. I really appreciate you coming on. If anyone wants to go find you, go ahead and shout yourself out real quick. Where can they go and look?
Yeah, of course. I'm definitely most active on Instagram at AlexWildMTB. So I do questions every Monday, try to help the community answer the questions that'll help them ride more. So if you have any further questions or want to reach out to me, that's the best place to do it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me.